I'm not going to say I ever disliked the PDP, but it was never one of my favorites. This has kind of brought the PDP into a slightly new light for me. Hey everyone, I'm Brett, and welcome to Nightwood Guns. I haven't really discussed the Walther PDP much on my channel, but we are finally here today with the Walther PDP Steel Frame Compact. I'm going to be reviewing this gun and talking about my feelings about the PDP overall. The Walther PDP is typically described by its detractors as being chunky, snappy, and, the ridiculous claims about the lip on the bottom of the magwell, making it so you can acquire your dot easier. Now, going into the PDP Steel Frame Compact review, I was not the biggest fan of Walther PDPs in general, but I really wanted to commit to this gun, and I spent a long time, put about 1,500 rounds through this gun, thanks to, of course, Buffalo Creek ammunition. That is my go-to target ammo nowadays. There's something on screen to help you out if you're looking to pick something up in bulk. So we're going to go over all the features, ergonomics, shooting performance, and reliability of the PDP Steel Frame, and also if you need any things for your things, then the thing on your screen is going to be a thing that you are going to be grateful for. So first of all, right off the bat, with the Walther PDP Steel Frame series, my first observation is just, wow, this is a really nice gun. You just pick it up and it feels expensive. In my opinion, the Steel Frame series from Walther very much feels like they make them like they used to kind of feeling. For a striker gun, the slide to frame fit is excellent. Just all around, it oozes of craftsmanship that doesn't really exist in modern pistol manufacturing at mass levels. Walther should be very proud of the actual quality of this pistol. It's something I was not expecting and was very pleasantly surprised by. Now, of course, Walther PDPs are famous for their incredible triggers. And I have to say, as far as striker-fired pistols go, in my opinion, this is the best factory trigger, period. I was able to consistently hit .11 splits with this on rapid fire. So the fact that a striker-fired pistol from the factory can do that with ease impresses me. And of course, I want to draw some attention to Canik as well, because I know it's going to get brought up, but where did Canik get their ideas for design from? But the quality of the PDP trigger trumps the Canik. This is number one in my opinion. Now, the trigger isn't without its quirks. It does have a lot of take-up, like I would consider a significant amount of take-up, and it has a weird kind of false wall in the take-up where you hit a wall here and then push past it and you hit the actual wall and then you have the break. But when you're actually shooting this thing, especially at speed, that's not something you're ever going to feel or be annoyed by unless you're like shooting wrong. So blowing right past all of that to the wall, the trigger press itself has very little travel. Again, as far as striker-fired pistols go, the M&P with the Apex is very similar. And the reset is really aggressive. It's one of the things that makes it so easy to split fast. Woo! Very short, and it just pushes forward. Now, be sure to stay tuned because I'm going to talk about the Walther PDP being snappy or having a sharp recoil impulse later on in the video, but right now I want to touch on the return to zero. Now, if you're unfamiliar with that, that means when you pull the trigger, boom, obviously it recoils and then it returns back to the exact point you were originally aiming at. And to me, the Walther PDP has one of the most aggressive return to zeros I've ever seen. This thing snaps back right to where you were aiming. And I think that's one of the reasons why so many people can be very accurate shooting the Walther PDP. Of course, paired with the phenomenal trigger. Sorry for the quick interruption. If you're enjoying this video, be sure to hit that like, thumbs up button. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. That is the best way to support me right now. And leaving a comment down below helps more than you know, so I'd really appreciate your help down there. Other than that, if you want to help the channel thrive, you can check out the links in the description down below for all of the ways you can help support. The growth of the channel is all thanks to you guys. I'm just really glad you've been enjoying. Now let's get back to the video. Talking about more of the actual features of the gun, I adore the slide serrations on this guy. They go all the way up to the top, so no matter where you are, if you're reaching around the top, from underneath, there's a place for you to grab this thing, and they are really deep, so they really bite into you, but they're well blended, so they're not cutting up your fingers. They are pushing it for how deep they are to the point where maybe they could get caught or snag on something, but I don't really think it's going to be an issue, but maybe worth mentioning. It does have an ambi slide stop, and while it's not pretty, in fact, it looks kind of cheap, gross, and out of place on this otherwise beautiful firearm, it's extremely effective and efficient. Pretty much all hand sizes are going to be able to reach this thing, and it is stepped out with some decent serrations on there to make sure if you need to do an emergency reload and use it as a slide release, it's going to be a piece of cake. Now for the steel frame in particular, my favorite thing about it is the fact that you can change the grips, and there are some excellent grip options out there. So the factory grip kind of bulges out. It has a hump in the back of it for ergonomics and to give you some more surface area to grip and get your hand on that texture. Now this texture is okay. It's good enough. I think it's a good compromise between being grippy and being comfortable to carry against your skin. But my personal preference is for something a little more aggressive, and Lock Grips makes the best grips for the steel frame Walthers. And of course they make my favorite grips for Berettas as well. Now these are their G10 Veloce grips. I like that pattern the best. And this particular model that I have on here actually chops the hump off the back of the pistol. So this is an excellent option for smaller hands. I wanted to try it out because I never tried it. It's a little too small for me, especially on the compact. But just know that having this option makes this a small hand friendly gun. And there's an argument to be had that if you have a thinner grip, you're not really gripping it as hard with your shooting hand, which could make running your trigger finger a little easier. But for me, I prefer the extra surface area that the hump offers so that I can crank down with my support hand. And of course, Lock Grips does make the humped options as well. I do not like the texture on the polymer frame versions of the PDP. It's a little too slick for me. So this is a huge win for the steel frame. It solves an issue that I had with the polymer version. Moving on to the next feature, I love the magazine release on this thing. It is a big checkered button that cannot be missed, but it also doesn't stick out so far that the magazine is accidentally coming unseated when you set it on a table or, bump it when it's holstered. There's also some amazing and fine checkering on the front strap of the pistol, along with the front of the trigger guard, just adding to that overall quality feel. The beaver tail on this thing is absolutely insane. Allows you to get your hand really deep into the gun, and of course it protects you from slide bite, and it feels really comfy in hand. Now the overall ergonomics of the pistol I think are going to work for most people. I think overall it's a very comfortable pistol to hold and shoot, but it is kind of humpy and curvy, and that's not everybody's bag. So if you can hold one of these before picking it up, I definitely recommend that. Now I've touched on shooting performance a little, but putting 1,500 rounds through this thing and running it for a couple of months, this thing grew on me. Now if you're new around here, I'm someone who's really used to Glocks, Berettas, wheel guns, M&Ps, USPs, and of course the thing I shoot the absolute most, 2011 style pistols. Now shooting that diverse lineup of handguns very frequently means that I can adapt to most pistols very easily, but the PDP feels so different from those that it took some time in committing to this to perform at a level that I'm used to with it. But once I got used to the ergonomics on this thing, I realized why so many high-level shooters really enjoy these pistols, specifically the steel frames. These things absolutely, objectively shred. They're just kind of different. They stand out on their own from the crowd, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But as I mentioned earlier, lightning fast splits and great accuracy speak for themselves. Something else worth mentioning when it comes to shooting performance is the actual mechanical accuracy of this pistol, and this goes for all PDPs, including the polymer frames. They are some of the most mechanically accurate, mass-produced pistols I've ever come across. You can bench these things and just cut a one-hole group with them with target ammo. And of course, as previously mentioned, people will complain about how snappy the PDP is. Well, the very heavy weight of the steel frame gun, it helps make it a little softer shooting. It's still not really a soft shooting gun, but compared to the polymer frame, it does tame things a bit and makes it so much easier to hold this thing steady on long distance precision shots as well. So kind of two birds, one stone there. But that's why everyone is always demanding that every manufacturer make a steel frame version of their gun. That's why people like steel frames. Well, that and of course extreme long-term durability as well. But as far as shooting performance goes, there are some things I'm going to mention in the negatives section, and that'll be in just a minute here, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, reliability. I had a little bit of a mixed bag with my first PDP. It had some issue where it was just randomly choking pretty frequently. I had to send it back into Walther. They sent it back to me and they would not tell me what they fixed on it, but it was working. And that always kind of sketched me out because I'm like, okay, well, what do I look for? Like, how do I know it's going to start happening again? Like, is there anything I can monitor? And just having no information or no feedback, I don't know, it just never really sat well with me and didn't inspire confidence in the pistol. That being said, this steel frame ran 100%. I never cleaned this thing. I never even oiled it. This thing just ran for 1,500 rounds. That's got to say something. Now, before we hop into negatives, I want to thank today's sponsor, DPM Systems. They make recoil reduction systems that are recoil spring assemblies for pistols. And for my YouTube manual reviewer, this doesn't alter how the gun fires whatsoever. It just absorbs recoil. It's just like upgrading the shocks on your truck. It doesn't turn it into a Ferrari. But a lot of people will think that their Walther PDPs are a little on the snappy side, and I always recommend DPM Systems adjustable kit so you can tune it to the ammo that you're shooting. You can tune it to the way you grip the gun so that it still has an excellent return to zero. It's just softer shooting than from the factory. DPM systems are a great way to squeeze an extra couple percentage points out of the performance of your pistol, and I recommended them before they even knew who I was, and I'm grateful to have them as a channel sponsor. Now, hopping into the negatives or the cons, the first thing that I want to mention is the disassembly lever here. This little sucker's kind of sharp, and it's out of place on an otherwise blended gun. So if you're not careful in your gun handling, this thing will scratch you up pretty good. Next up, we have to talk about the recoil impulse of the Walther PDP. Now, people describe the recoil impulse as being sharper or punchier, or it has more muzzle flip than competitors on the market. And I can only speak to how it feels in my hand. That, yeah, it feels a little punchier than competitors. I think a few things contribute to that. One, this thing is probably very oversprung from the factory. The spring is so heavy in this that people with weaker hand strength won't even be able to cycle this pistol. Also, some will argue that since this has a stepped chamber, which you're picking up like 20 feet per second muzzle velocity from that, that might result in a slightly snappier gun. I don't know if I really buy that. 20 feet per second muzzle velocity seems kind of insignificant to me. But really, I think the biggest issue is just physics. This has a really chunky slide. It is a big, wide, tall, heavy slide that is reciprocating over your hand while you're shooting. When you compare the slide width with the M&P here, it's pretty obvious that the PDP is unreasonably girthy. When you add on the weight that comes with the increased dimensions, it's just a heavy, chunky slide reciprocating over your hand. That is why so many people will get a Walther PDP polymer frame, and what do? They get a new recoil spring assembly, whether that is a DPM or a ZR Tactical long stroke guide rod, or they're just changing to a 15-pound spring, or they get a spring co. Then people will take it a step further. They'll throw on a brass backstrap and a brass magwell. Then maybe they'll get it ported, or they'll add a compensator to it. Just PDP owners seem to chase the dragon to get this thing shooting like some other guns on the market. So in my opinion, when you get any PDP, you are getting the striker fire gun with the best factory trigger on the market, period. But the trade-off is you're getting a gun that has a sharper recoil impulse. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, at least not for everybody. If you can ride the lightning of that punchier recoil impulse with this thing, you can run it so fast and so accurately. It just takes a little more input when you're doing it. It's going to be a personal preference thing. I mean, this thing returns to zero so fast and is always ready for the next shot, right where you want it to go. You just have to have the actual technique to excel with that punchier recoil impulse. I just have a personal preference for softer shooting guns when I'm shooting a gun chambered in 9mm because that's what I'm used to. I love 10mm, 45 ACP, 357 Magnum, you name it, but when I'm shooting a 9mm, I like it to feel more like a 9mm. Like, to me, that's one of the main benefits of going with that caliber. Now, moving on to the next negative, this thing has a really tiny magwell, and while it is a little beveled in there, this thing is pretty easy to miss. So just know that reloads are going to take a little more practice with how small that little magwell area is. It took me a handful of reps to get used to it. Next up, for an otherwise well-blended gun, obviously I mentioned the takedown lever, but there is a sharp edge on mine right here on the trigger guard where I'm getting almost like Glock knuckle on my on my middle finger when gripping the gun. So I would like to see the edges right there near the magazine release area just blended and melted a little more to the frame, especially at this price point. Now, I mentioned how wide the slide is on this thing, but I didn't mention how wide the frame is. This thing is pretty insane. Carrying this thing inside the waistband, keep in mind this is the compact version, man, it bulges the belt out. And as if this insanely wide frame wasn't enough, the takedown lever just makes it even wider. And that segues into the weight of the pistol. This thing is heavy. In fact, I would even argue it's heavier than you would expect even for a steel frame gun when you pick the thing up. Now, I mentioned earlier that the heavy weight of the pistol tames the recoil impulse that is significantly worse on the polymer frame version. But this is a compact pistol. Compact pistols are typically designed for carry. This thing might be a little on the heavy side. If you're wearing a good belt, it's not a problem. But the speed at which you can get it out of the holster, it might add like a 1/10 of a second to your draw until you build up the muscle memory needed to get something so heavy out of your holster fast. And then that would probably just speed up your draw with lighter guns. And the final negative is this is an optic-ready pistol that does not have lower co-witness sights. I have a calculated kinetics dog tag plate on here because it's my favorite plate. It's my personal preference. Walther does give you a free plate when you buy one of these. You just have to go to their, site and order it, and they, send it to you for free. But then you don't have lower co-witness sights, so I just got the plate from Calculated Kinetics and the backup irons on there as well. Calculated Kinetics makes it super easy to order the optic, the plate, and the lower co-witness sights. You can just get the whole package there ready to go. They send you the bit, they send you the screws, you don't have to worry about anything. But at this price point, I would expect these sights to already be on the gun. In conclusion, the PDP Steel Frame is a phenomenal pistol. For those of you who hate 2011s, I would view the Walther Steel Frame as being a 2011 alternative. It is so vastly different from 2011s that if you don't love those, you're probably going to love this, and they are very comparable when it comes to actual quality and arguably shooting performance. But the increased weight of the pistol and improved ergonomics thanks to the steel frame design and the ability to swap out grips to these lovely Lock G10 grips makes me like the PDP a lot more. I'm not going to say I ever disliked the PDP, but it was never one of my favorites. This has kind of brought the PDP into a slightly new light for me. I certainly like this a lot more. I respect the platform a lot more after running this thing somewhat extensively. And I think the vast majority of people that pick up a steel frame Walther PDP are going to be extremely satisfied with it. Holding this gun, it just feels like you have an absolute pride of ownership over the quality craftsmanship that only Germany could deliver. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's video, everyone. It was great seeing you again, and I'll see you in the next video. I'm Brett, and this was Nightwood Guns. Nightwood out.